In June 2020, George Floyd, who was a 46-year-old black American, was killed by a policeman in the United States. The video of the police officer kneeling on Floyd's neck for over 8 minutes circulated around the world, initially sparking the Black Lives Matter protests. I set out to investigate prejudice around blackness and whether the Black Lives Matter protests have influenced people's opinions on the matter of racial bias and racism in the UK, and in particular in Bristol. During the protests in Bristol, the Edward Colston statue was pulled down by protesters.
The protests were peaceful. People walked through the city centre, and the Edward Colston statue was also toppled.
And do you know who Edward Colston was?
He was the reason he was toppled was because he was a slave trader who imported thousands and thousands of slaves from the Caribbean into Bristol to bring them to work unfairly, and thousands of slaves died in his company.
In a study conducted by Bristol Live, 61% of participants believed that the protesters were right to pull the Edward Colston statue down. Do you think that the Edward Colston statue should have been pulled down?
Yes, I do believe it should be taken down. I don't think you should idolise someone with a past like that.
Yeah, I do think it should have been pulled down. I didn't even know, but from the pulling down of the Edward Colston statue, I learned that people in Bristol have been asking the council for years and years for that to be pulled down.
My understanding is that many people in Bristol had been protesting to request that the statue is pulled down for many, many years and had been ignored. So yes, on balance, I do believe it was right that it was pulled down, and it certainly raised awareness.
Absolutely, it should have been brought down. It should have been brought down a long, long time ago. And yeah, it makes me super proud of my Bristol people for doing that.
Taken down, because I think you can teach history and you can teach all of the things that people have done, but there is no reason to have a statue that shows someone who did quite appalling things, or even if he personally didn't do them, his organisation and who he represented did some appalling things. And so sure, we can talk about some of the good stuff he did, but there's the bad kind of outweighs that, and there's no reason to then publicly promote him in that way.
On the other hand, 20% of participants that took part in the Bristol Live survey believed that the Colston statue should not have been pulled down and considered it to be an act of vandalism.
Should it have been pulled down the way it was? That's a tough one. I think possibly the mob rule overtook feelings that day and brought it down. I'm not sure I necessarily agree with the way it was brought down though.
I'm not really sure how to answer whether I think the Colston statue should have been pulled down. I've not really thought about it that much, if I'm honest. I don't think he should be so celebrated anymore though, because I don't think many people actually realised that he did have so much to do with the slave trade.
Before the Black Lives Matter protests transpired in 2020, statistics show the huge inequalities that black people face institutionally. A study conducted in 2017 shows that black people living in Bristol are 4 times more likely to be unemployed than a white person.
The place I work, we have quite a lot of people from different backgrounds, from all over the world, different religions, and unfortunately patients and people that come here don't always like that and will judge people for their religion or skin colour rather than the job they're doing.
Yeah, I have witnessed racism. I have a friend from Iran, obviously has an Iranian name. She did 3 years of university, got a really great degree, came out really excited for her future and thought she would have loads of opportunities awaiting for her. She quickly found out that wasn't the case, and unfortunately her options were far more limited than her white friends. She had the same skills, the same degree, the same course even as a lot of her white friends, and did not have the same opportunities as them.
I remember reading in the newspapers about things, the stop and search, that guys are black people are 7 times more likely to be stopped and searched by the police. And I also work in an industry where 90% of my clients are from the BAME community, and 100% of them have experienced racism, either from kind of members of the public or actually have been disproportionately treated unfairly by statutory services, whether that's child services or the police force, probation service inside prisons. So yeah, I was well aware.
From my interviews, the issue around prejudice and racial discrimination alongside institutional racism can be seen through racially abusive language.
I've been to a football game where I've witnessed fans chanting racial slurs and noises, making monkey noises towards the players.
I have witnessed it and heard it when I've been to watch football matches, sadly, a few years back now. But to hear monkey chants every time a black player gets the ball absolutely disgusts me.
Every participant who was interviewed said that they have either witnessed or experienced racism throughout their lifetime. Most significantly, the participants who have experienced it firsthand can provide an insight into what it is like living as a black person in the UK.
You're going to buy a house and the estate agent doesn't believe you could afford that house, even though you've walked in and you thought, well, you wouldn't have walked into that estate agent because you're not expected to be able to afford that.
Yeah.
A taxi will stop. I mean, I used to be a journalist many years ago, and I remember coming out of the office building. I was the first black journalist at the Financial Times, and I came out of the building trying to catch a cab, and a cab stopped in the bridge and said, "Oh, you know how it is. After 7 we don't take black people."
Oh my God.
and so there've been many things.
As a black person, you're always likely to experience racism at least once in your life. I've experienced racism. I don't know any other black person who hasn't experienced racism throughout the world, let alone in the UK.
Yeah. Do you have an example of when you've witnessed racism or experienced it, sorry?
Yeah, so when I was 16, someone just sent me a hate text. I can read it out.
Yes, please, that'd be brilliant.
It started off fine, and then out of nowhere they just said, "Shut up, you cocoa farming, tree swinging, marathon running, fat lip, stupid ass slave, cunt, boat boarding, lying, killing, thief, nigger."
The Black Lives Matter protests have opened the dialogue around racism in the UK. It has brought to light both societal and institutional racism that is embedded in British society. And although racism is still apparent today, many people believe that the protests have had a positive impact on the education and awareness of racial prejudice.
I feel it has highlighted race more with me. I mean, obviously I knew it existed. It's made me read more about it and certainly watch more documentaries on TV about it. I also work in a secondary school, and we have had several debates on the race and the BLM protests at school, so I'm much more aware of the fight than I was previously.
I think the Black Lives Matter has shown me more awareness of the matter.
I do think it makes it more current and keeps it in the forefront of people's minds, because I think people are guilty of just forgetting about what's going on in the world and just getting on with their own lives and not realising that these things are happening.
The Black Lives Matter movement has definitely informed me more on race and racial abuse. I go on social media a lot, so having social media and having that platform to read other people's stories of racial abuse and to read stories from around the world, really, of different racial abuse has been really educational and really helpful and useful for me to read about.
I've always viewed myself as quite well informed, but Black Lives Matter has certainly brought to the surface a lot of things that I was unaware of about racial injustice.
On the 20th of April 2021, Derek Chauvin was found guilty of the murder of George Floyd in America, which initially sparked the Black Lives Matter protests globally. Finally, a sense of hope and optimism that racial equality was finally starting to take a turning point. It has taken hundreds of years for society to acknowledge societal and institutional racism. And although the toppling of the Colson statue may not have changed people's views on racism, it has definitely brought to light the inequalities that Black people still face. Hopefully, we'll look back in history at this moment being one watershed moment in an ongoing fight for racial justice and equality.